live a happy, productive life, but sometimes we just need a little help. Our Coach On Call experts provide strategies to help you live your best life now. Joining me today is Linda Mitchell, a transformational life coach and reinvention expert who helps her clients move through life's challenges and transitions with purpose, passion, and clarity to emerge more powerful, fulfilled, and purposeful. Linda is here today to discuss the importance of self-compassion. Welcome, Linda. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Joan.
So, Linda, self-compassion is really much more than just being kind to ourselves. So how do you describe self-compassion, and why is it so important to our mental, emotional, and physical health?
Self-compassion is the practice of honoring yourself, not just when things are going smoothly, but also, and even more importantly, when life is challenging. Self-compassion is a necessary and healthy alternative to the typical knee-jerk reaction so many of us have to criticize ourselves during tough times. When we're going through a rough patch or experiencing suffering of any sort, self-compassion becomes the comforting, non-judgmental voice within that helps us find meaning, perseverance, and acceptance. It keeps us from getting stuck in a cycle of criticism, negativity, and perfectionism, all of which negatively affect our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Self-compassion is really a gift we give ourselves that results in strength and resilience as a byproduct of taking good care of ourselves. In some ways, self-compassion is the foundation of all healing, because having self-compassion means you're being kind, understanding, and forgiving toward yourself, much as you would be towards a good friend who's struggling. You would give them grace. Self-compassion is giving yourself grace instead of grief.
Most of us are not very good at the practice of self-compassion. So how then can we learn to develop this critical skill?
Even if you don't feel you're very good at the practice of self-compassion right now, the good news is, for everyone, no matter how much pain or suffering you may be carrying inside, it's still possible to develop self-compassion. Begin by noticing how you talk to yourself when things go awry. If you tend to be self-critical and judgmental more often than not, I invite you to be aware of two important things that will help you reverse this process. The first is to simply notice and acknowledge that harsh, judging voice inside your head. We all have it. Next, be willing to pause and notice how it makes you feel. Then ask yourself, would you like to feel differently? If you're willing to change the way you treat yourself in the face of mishaps, difficulties, and struggles, you're halfway there. Once you begin to notice the negative self-talk, you can remind yourself to choose different language. Begin to treat yourself like you would treat a dear friend or family member. I encourage people to really stop, choose more empowering words, and sit with the new feeling those words carry. Imagine how differently you'd feel when choosing kind, comforting, sympathetic, or forgiving words instead. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And soon you're going to find your default reaction is to be more gracious and less judgmental toward yourself. When you begin to practice self-compassion, you'll begin to understand that you're perfectly lovable just as you are right now, even if you have goals and aspirations for greater personal growth.
Linda, some people believe that self-compassion means to be selfish and that it would lead to self-indulgence or even self-pity. How does self-compassion differ?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's really important to recognize the differences. Self-compassion is a very different quality from self-indulgence or self-pity. Someone who is self-indulgent is hedonistic. They have an unrestrained focus on pursuing pleasure or self-gratification, whereas self-compassion is simply being loving and forgiving toward yourself. Now let's consider someone who tends towards self-pity. They're immersed in feeling sorry for themselves, and this even suggests that they may feel they're a victim without a chance to create better circumstances. By contrast, with self-compassion, you acknowledge you're capable of better, and you have a choice to act on that belief by using more empowering words and actions. Big difference. Don't worry that having self-compassion will make you develop a superego. This too is different because an egotistical person usually sees themselves as better than others or intentionally elevates their own needs above everyone else's. But a person who practices self-compassion tends to value everyone's happiness, and they're self-aware enough to know the importance of being kind and loving toward themselves as well as towards others. Having self-compassion means you honor who you are. You honor and understand your imperfections, limitations, your humanness. When we accept that we're going to fall down sometimes and we stop beating ourselves up for it, everything becomes easier, more peaceful. There's less drama and irritation because we can be compassionate towards ourselves. Clearly, we all go through challenges and difficult circumstances. So we all need a compassionate side of ourselves to get through them. Cultivating a mindset of compassion makes this possible and allows us to move through the tough stuff with more ease and grace.
Linda, thank you so much for joining us. It's a really wonderful reminder that unless we learn how to honor ourselves, it's very difficult to honor others. So if you would like to learn more about Linda and her work, you can visit her website, livinginspiredcoaching.com. And as always, to hear more from Linda, you can visit our website, cyacyl.com/Linda. We'll be right back.